Okay, we have a simple writing desk. 2 drawers, white oak, solid top, classic, traditional, back to basic. The type of desk you'd use for writing, reading, studying. In this video we'll go over how to build it. And if you'd like to make one yourself, we also have a very detailed building plan on our website that goes over a complete cut list and in-depth step-by-step instructions. This video is kind of like the companion to that building plan. Let's get into it. This desk measures 30 inches wide, 25 inches deep, and 29 3/4 inches high. We're using dowels for joinery for the main desk, and for the drawers we're using half-blind dovetails and box joints. The drawers are inset and glide on wooden rails within the frame, so no external drawer slides are needed. Let's start with the wood. This is rough sawn white oak. Very nice stuff, and if you have access to equipment to resaw, joint, plane, and cut it to size, it is a great way to go. Personally, I love white oak, and it is a very appropriate choice for a desk like this in terms of what would have traditionally been used. However, if you're sourcing wood from a home improvement store, pine boards or similar softwoods are a good alternative. So what we're doing here is starting out with resawing the wood on the bandsaw. This is our 17-inch grizzly bandsaw, and it's nice to have a large machine when you're working with such heavy wood. And just getting a feel here if this is enough wood for the top. Now the top is made up of gluing several boards together, and obviously these can be of any width that you have access to, as long as the final size ends up to be 25 by 30 inches. And actually, in order to accomplish that, we're gluing together slightly longer pieces to have some space to cut the final piece to size once everything has dried. Now, what makes a good glue up? I'd say boards that are completely square on the sides, so you'll get a smooth, tight fit during the gluing process. Similar height is nice too, but not as necessary. If they're uneven in height, it will just mean more work for you later on. But it sure is nice to have a thickness planer smoothing out the wood. Width is looking good, and yeah, take a look at that white oak pattern. I mean, this is not quarter sawn, but even with plain sawing, we're still getting those characteristic patterns and even some reflex in some of the pieces. So, all prepared for the glue up. First up, a dry fit. I promise it is very frustrating to start a glue up just to realize halfway through that the clamps are not quite long enough or you don't have enough of them. We're using a foam brush, which gives good coverage on both sides of the wood. Also like adding a little bit of wax paper underneath the wood to prevent it from sticking to the clamps. And then of course, just providing good and even clamp coverage here. Squeezing tight, but not too tight. As you can see, there are quite a few inconsistencies in terms of height. So to solve this problem, we're running it on the CNC with a large surfacing bit. It makes for an even surface, even though we're running it pretty fast, and there will be some work sanding to remove some of the marks left from the CNC. Other options in terms of getting it nice and flat would be a hand plane, a power plane, a router with a jig, or just old-fashioned coarse sandpaper, although that's something we'll need to do no matter what. As I mentioned, this is white oak, and there are quite a few little holes in this wood. A couple larger ones and a bunch of small ones. To fill those, we're adding a layer of epoxy on the whole desk actually, taping the back for the large holes. Then cleaning up the finishing a bit with a hand plane once dry here before moving on to, doing a whole bunch of sanding. The top is flattened, sanded and roughly cut, but now let's cut it to its very final size. And check if it works on the frame, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. However, that is what the frame will look like once we've built it. And it's a good fit. So next step is rounding those edges and corners so it will be nice and smooth and you won't bump into any part hurting yourself. So a round over bit works great, and yeah, it's looking good. For a finish we're using polyurethane, but other good options would be shellac or lacquer. The bottom gets a coat primarily to protect against moisture, which helps prevent warping over time. And the top got 3 coats. I mean, the top is really the thing that will get the most wear on this whole piece of furniture, so if there is any place to focus the most in terms of finish, it's definitely the top. Okay, so done with that, but we still have the rest of the desk to build, so we need some more wood. The building plan contains the complete cut list, plus instructions. And all in all, if you count the top as one piece of wood, the whole desk is made up of 34 pieces. I mean, we have the top, the legs, the main frame, the drawers, and the interior drawer slides. I think that's all. Next up we have the legs, and this is one part. If you're using dimensional lumber, you might need to do some gluing. The legs measure 1 3/4 by 1 3/4 inches, and that square shape is really nice. It adds a bit of heft to the desk. So for this design, I don't think thin legs would work as well. So the legs are positioned in the corners, and then we'll be using dowels to secure them to the sides and the back and the front. The front has 2 pieces with an opening in the middle, and this is obviously where the drawers will go. I really like using dowels for joinery. I mean, it's simple, affordable, and you only need a doweling jig and plugs. Now the thing about using dowels is each piece of wood is cut to the exact length needed to butt up against the other piece. And this is also true for other methods like pocket hole construction, biscuits, and similar joinery techniques. Therefore, this plan can easily be adapted to your preferred joinery method as long as it follows the same principle. However, if you choose joinery like mortise and tenons, where one piece extends into the other, then you'll need to adjust the length of certain pieces. So, the one thing you need is a doweling jig. It's essential that the holes in both pieces align perfectly. And even if you think you can freehand it, a jig will make it a lot easier. Now you can see here we added a spacer to the jig for certain holes, and that's for the legs where we have a set of holes going in one direction and another set of holes in another. So this is to position the holes in a slightly different space and to get consistent results, and basically avoid having the 2 sets of holes overlap. The positioning of the holes in the legs can be a bit confusing, so to make it clearer I have laid out exactly in the plan where each hole goes. Once all the holes are drilled, we're going to pre-finish the pieces, and this will give you a more professional looking result later on. But before that we need to break any hard edges and do a bit of sanding and make sure that all the pieces are nice and smooth and ready to be finished. So the idea is to tape over any sections where there will be holes, then pre-finish, and then assemble and finish everything once again. Now the dowel positioning for the most part is pretty straightforward. On the back piece, however, we're also connecting a center divider section to the front, and that's being doweled in as well. So to do that, we're finding the center on the back piece, drilling holes in the end grain in the divider piece, and marking that center line with the dowel center hole points that you insert into the drilled holes, and then you push it on the wood to make marks. And then you use those marks as a guide for drilling the holes. And those dowel center points are pretty handy for situations like this. And now we're at the point of assembly for the frame of the desk. So, the order of assembly. We're starting with connecting the back piece. Now moving on to the front side, and there's one little detail we have to take care of before continuing with the assembly. So that center dividing piece I was talking about earlier needs to be notched a bit in order to fit in between the two front pieces. For the front section, the two middle pieces are turned the other way, so the 3/4 inch side is facing outwards. And here's the notched piece going in between, which will rest there. Assembling with dowels is pretty straightforward. A little bit of glue in the hole, not too much or you can break the joint. Insert the dowel, hit it with a mallet, add a little more glue and insert it into the prepared hole, which also has a bit of glue. The combination of wood and glue together, once dried, is so strong that this makes for a much more secure connection than if you were using metal fasteners like screws. So we assemble each section at a time, clamp and let it dry, and then we can add the side pieces to the back section and connect it to the front section. The amount of dowels you use in a glue up like this is actually quite a lot. There are quite a few pieces to connect, and of course everything has to go in order or else it won't come together right. And then once you have the whole package assembled, it's time to bring out your longest clamps and put some pressure on those joints. Now, to secure the middle divider that's notched out and resting in between the two front pieces, we're drilling a hole and gluing in a dowel, and that will lock it in place beautifully. Next, it's time to start working on the drawers. We're continuing using white oak here. It's a little thinner at 1/2 inch as opposed to 3/4 inch, which we use for the main desk frame. After cutting the wood, checking to make sure it's not too wide and that it slides easily in the desk opening. Turns out it needed to be planed down just a touch. There are obviously a lot of ways to make a drawer. The joinery methods we chose are partly related to the construction of the desk. So the drawers will sit inset, and there's only one piece of wood for the drawer front, so no front capping pieces. That means if you want a front that's seamless, you need joinery that doesn't show. A classic choice then is half-blind dovetails. Basically, we're hiding the dovetails, but they're still there, and you see them when you open the drawer. And since they're not necessary for the back, we went with classic box joints for that section. The tails are definitely a bit more straightforward to cut than the pins, where you really need to be careful not to break through that thin wall of wood that's hiding the dovetails. If this seems too complicated, you could definitely do full dovetails, or go with box joints in the front. I mean, the joint would just be visible, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing, it's just a different look. Of course, another option altogether would be to reduce the size of the drawer and then add a faceplate. That way you can connect it in any way you'd like. Although, in terms of classic joinery, half-blind dovetails are kind of a neat idea. drawer we're using 1/8" plywood. A groove is cut in the drawer sides, and that way the bottom can sit inset inside the drawer. Of course, always save some of the sawdust of whatever wood you're working on, so you can mix it with some glue and create your very own perfect wood filler to fill in any gaps in the joinery. This is nice to do as you're gluing the drawer together. That way it will have time to dry overnight and everything can be sanded even the next day. In terms of knobs, we decided to make our own on the CNC. You can buy a set of knobs if you'd like, or use our file to cut out your own if you prefer, or use a lathe, make your own design. To secure it, we simply drill the hole in the front of the drawer and secure the screw from inside the drawer going through the hole and into the knob. In terms of finishing, we finish the outside of the drawers, but not the insides. Now the drawers will ride on wooden drawer slides that connect to the sides of the inside of the frame. That way you don't need to bother with metal drawer slides. You're basically building a little shelf for them to ride on. There are 4 rails here, 2 for each drawer. And to make sure the drawers were riding in and out straight, we added some guiding rails a little higher up on the sides as well. Before securing the top here, we're treating it with a coat of our tung oil beeswax polish, which we also sell in our shop. And did you know if you add wax polish with steel wool, once your other finish has cured, you'll have the smoothest top you can imagine. And to secure the top to the frame, we're simply using 4 small brackets and small screws. And there you have it. A very classic design, where the theme is simplicity. A desk that you can grow with and use as a desk or table for hopefully many years to come. Perhaps someone in the future will engrave their information on the bottom of the drawer and add to this note. You never know. If you're interested in building a keepsake desk for yourself or someone in your family, make sure to check out the building plan that goes over the cut list and more detailed step-by-step instructions. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.